Here.
Jeannie.
Here.
Larry.
Here.
Brian.
Here.
Ashley. Here. And our student representatives, Musab.
Here.
Dylan. Here. All right, thank you, everyone. Notice of meeting,
The meeting was properly noticed.
adoption of agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, please stand. We'll do the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we start tonight with the Spotlight on Learning with Pewaukee Lake Elementary. Brian?
All right, Brian, come on down.
Good evening, everyone. We are here to present just a quick data update on PLE. We're a bit at an awkward phase right now in data gathering. We're right in the middle of our winter data gathering. So the data I'm presenting is a snapshot of where we are right now, knowing that we're going to have more coming in. So once that's all wrapped up, I'll put it all together and I'll give it to Danielle to give to you just as a change from what you may be seeing tonight to where we end up the period, because we gather some data right when we get back from winter break, and then we give other ones the rest of this week as kids get a bit more acclimated to being back in school. First few days are a little bit tough for 5-year-olds. So we're currently going through our second round of DWAs, which is a district writing assessment. You'll notice that tonight I'm talking about first grade and second grade. Kindergarten will be going through their very first DWA day later on this month. The reason being for that is they're just slowly coming out of the transition of being able to draw pictures and label those pictures and talk about their stories to now being able to write about them. So after them being able to put sentences to their pictures, they did their first DWA right before winter break. Those are going to be scored in the upcoming weeks, and then they'll be going through their data dive together. So it's just going to be first grade and second grade tonight. First grade, they have their second round. I believe it's next week to go through their winter data. So the current one is technically from fall. What you can see here is what their goals are in comparison to the 5K data, and then the current data is what we had from our first DWA days. And you can see some discrepancies there, but that's what we expect, because when they are proficient at the end of 5K, we don't expect them to be proficient right away in first grade, because the standard, that level of proficiency should go up. And we'll address that in just a second. Second grade here, you can see they just had their second DWA last week. So this winter data reflects their growth from fall to winter in the 3 areas of their focus this year of punctuation, craft, as well as spelling. So you can see some really nice growth with our second graders. And really closing in on what we think their goal can be for the end of the school year. What we noticed through all this is that the language and the way that we interpret proficiency scales is a little bit different at each grade level. So if I go back to first grade, you can see that at the end of 5K for transitions, it was at a 2.7. We would have expected something a lot lower than 2.53 for their fall data. But just the way that first grade and kindergarten interpreted how they use transitions, we noticed that vertically we weren't quite aligned with that. So in the upcoming professional development day, we're going to start some vertical alignment about the language within our proficiency scales and what that means, as well as what that looks like at each grade level, so that we can be a bit more aligned between each grade level of when they move from 5K to first to second, of how those expectations change with the language. And then as we have 5K and the first grade second round of that, I'll get that data to Danielle to share with all of you. So any questions about writing so far? Yeah.
Can you go back to one of the slides with the data?
Yep.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correct, it appears the numbers went down, but it's not, they didn't go down because the level of expectation is higher. Am I interpreting that right?
So talking about a proficiency scale, a 3 is going to be proficient.
Okay.
So if we look at something like punctuation, we see that in first grade, in spring of first grade, as a grade level as a whole, they were just shy as proficient as a grade level.
Oh.
So when we take that in terms of second grade expectations, and they come in in fall and second grade, we wouldn't expect that level of writing at the end of first grade to still be proficient in October in second grade. If they're still performing like they did in spring of first grade, that's going to be even further away, or lower than proficient than what we expect. So that data that we're seeing in punctuation, that's more reflective of if the grade is performing there, we expect them to be further from proficiency and then making that progress up towards it throughout the year. Whereas something in kindergarten, like I said, with transitions, how those are so close, we know that the way that the two grade levels are interpreting how transitions should look and examples of good transitions used in 5K versus first grade, that we're not quite aligned in how it progresses from one grade to the next. All right, and then CGA, this is a comprehensive growth assessment in math. So here, I would say we're pretty much 80% of the way through each grade level, so these numbers may change slightly by the end of this week. But we are seeing some huge growth across our entire school. So verbal counting, this is just how high 4Kers can count out loud. In fall, it was just around 19. Right now, grade level average is about 30. Number combinations up through 5 on a 5-point scale. You can see basically a growth from a 2.8 to 3.8. And then in 5K, verbal counting to 100, that's a goal by the end of the year. The grade level started at 57, which is higher than it has been in the past. So thank you, 4K teachers, for all of your hard work last year. But you can see as a grade level right now, the averages of kids can count to right around 90 at the end of the year standard there. One-to-one correspondence, this is a 17-point scale with 15 being proficient. And you can see that as a grade level, we've gone from just below proficient to nearly maxing out the scale. Fluency to 5 on a 3-point scale, we're nearly there. And then decomposing to 10, this is one piece that we're going to be assessing later on this week with 5K. We have a couple classes in, but if I were to present that, it wouldn't be accurate as to where the majority of the grade level is right now. In first grade, you can see addition and subtraction growth on a 21-point scale. Some huge growth, especially in subtraction, which we've notoriously said in first grade has been an area that's lacking. So you can see, especially now in subtraction, halfway through the year, the grade level average is nearly proficient. And then problem solving, there are 2 categories in problem solving. We went from a 1.69 and 1.41 to nearly 3 in each category for both of those. And then second grade as well, those addition, subtraction, they're doing a bit more fluency up through 20, which is why you see it's a higher scale there. And you can see that we're nearly proficient in addition across the grade level, and then nearly proficient as well in subtraction already. Their problem solving is based on a 4-point scale, and you can see that we are above 3 in both of those. So next steps with CGA. At our January PD day, we are doing learning sprints this year, focused on math. So we're going to be taking the CGA data and then planning out our next groups about who needs what in each of those areas that you see here, which ones are not quite up to proficiency or trailing the grade level average, so we can put in some more focused work with them between our January PD day and our February PD day.
All right. Anyone have any questions?
Ryan, are these the tests that you use to kind of keep track of how the kids are doing since they don't take the forward exam until third grade?
Yeah, so we use these also in combination with STAR. I will say that as a staff, people aren't as familiar with STAR reports and how to use them for their instructional planning. We're including more of those sessions during our PD days of which STAR reports to look at and how you can use them. But they're very familiar with DWA. We have a half day of teachers planning together, planning small groups, and creating focus groups with that. With our literacy coach. So that's an assessment that they use directly. And the CGA, we use this as the basis for our learning sprint. So again, we're analyzing the data to plan next steps. The only other piece that is there is STAR, and we're becoming more proficient as a staff on how to use that. So I always tell teachers, we don't collect data that we're not going to use.
Can I ask Brian, so the scales that you were referencing, are those really, is the top of the scale the end of your target?
For the
So
CGA.
like here, the 32-point scale or the 21-point
So
scale?
the maximum number of points you can get on those series of questions would be 32.
Right.
Proficiency for like second grade edition would be 30, 31, or 32.
Okay.
So that's
you're at
maxing
30
it
now.
out. And then for the kids who, let's say we've got a kid who scores a 32 in fall on addition, we don't test them again on it. We also know that because they maxed out in fall, that they need some more. They need some scaled up work. They need some different types of activities during workplaces. They need some differentiation to keep their addition skills growing into third grade.
Right, so my follow-up question is, you guys are gonna meet on the 23rd, spend some time on the CGA data. In a lot of these cases, you're darn near maxing the scale or hitting the target at the halfway point of the year. So what are your thoughts about revising the goal and stretching and revising targets? Is that part of the plan to stretch and try to go higher?
So that's a discussion I've had with the math coaches. So last year when we did the CGA, each one, fall, winter, and spring, were different. So it was tough for us to compare the data, especially with problem solving. It was a new type of problem, and the data just wasn't accurate for us. So now seeing if we're giving the same assessment throughout, we have talked about, do we need to include more elements that are challenging that we don't think they'll get until spring. So we want to see kind of where we end up this year. And then we'll revisit that with the grade levels of, all right, how are we going to make sure that we don't have a kid in winter topping out on everything and we're not getting new data for them come spring.
All right. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
All right. Thank
Great
you guys.
job. Thank you,
Thanks, Beth.
PLE. Thanks, Beth.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, Beth. All right, moving on to our student board representative report. Zab, Dylan?
All right, so here we've got our January student board report, and first point we wanted to cover was our course scheduling that we did. And this was obviously only freshmen through juniors. So at the high school, we had a class test drive week, which was where students were able to go to resource and test out different possible class options that they'd be interested in for the next school year, just to kind of get a feel for, is this the right class for them? Is this the right teacher for them? And it helped us kind of get to know what our schedules might look like in the next year and what we'd be doing on a day-to-day schedule.
And then in the middle school, a little bit of a unique scheduling or preview to scheduling happened with an elective roundtable. So with this event, presentations were held in the auditorium for the various grade levels with elective teachers talking about what their class covers and the different things that you learn in each class, as well as just the different paths that they have involving prerequisites as well. And this was conducted to help especially the younger grades and with the sixth graders being exposed to electives for the first time this year, understand how these classes work and what they're going to be involved Next, we wanted to highlight some of the holiday service events and then donation drives that happen throughout the district. So, at the high school, there were two main events that happened during the month of December. The first one was a Hawes dog biscuit project. So this was done in coordination with the high school's Pro Start class and Horizon third grade classes. So the Pro Start classes were able to collaborate with them and work with them and use what the third grade classes were learning in math about area and perimeter to develop different shapes and models for dog biscuits or cutters for dog biscuits. And what they were able to do was use 3D printers and items from the innovation centers and makerspaces at Horizon and create these models for them to create actual dog biscuits to donate to Hawes. For the holiday decoration project, this was done with the Serving Others Insight program, which has been highlighted in our reports many times. So they worked with Schulte's Greenhouse and Nursery to create tree gnomes and different decorations to place both around our school and our campus, and then also around downtown Pewaukee as well. Next, at Asa Clark and Horizon. So we highlighted before the Raise Craze program that was conducted to raise money for the PTO. And a really cool thing that Mrs. Juslow's resource did and Asa Clark was use that money not for their own enjoyment or for their own classroom, but to donate to others and to help out with the Christmas Clearing Council. So they used that money that they raised to buy gifts and then buy wrapping paper to conduct a wrapping party or a wrapping day in their resource and donate those presents to the Christmas Clearing Council. And then Horizon, they had a tie blanket project with over 70 blankets created and donated, and a holiday treat cart created by special education students. As you can see in the picture towards the center of the slide, their special education students were able to create a holiday cart with treats to serve to teachers and spread some holiday cheer.
And then we had some athletics to focus on. First of all, with intramural basketball, a student draft was recently completed, and Mr. Behrens was able to compile a schedule for us to have to play, and all students who wanted to participate are included regardless of basketball experience. So it's not like a select thing. It's not like anyone's going to get cut. Everyone gets to have the same amount of fun. And then for both boys and girls basketball, getting massive wins against conference rival Wisconsin Lutheran. Boys had a really hard-fought 75-67 victory, and the girls had a wildly dominant 91-46 victory.
And then wrestling also had some great achievement over the past month and a half with a 79-0 shutout victory against Pius. And then they also competed in the Flavin Invitational and the Cheesehead Tournament, I believe this past Friday and Saturday. And then we also had a lot of achievement in activities as well. Our academic decathlon team placed third in their local competition and second in their regional competition, allowing them to head to state. Our robotics recently kicked off their season on Saturday, the 7th, with their kickoff meeting, and the theme this year is Charged Up, focusing on energy and sustainability. Our Science Olympiad team recently competed on the 7th as well at the Marquette Invitational, gearing up for their regional and state competitions. And then the drama department, or the drama club, will be having their play, The Lightning Thief, on January 25th.
And then we've just got some salutes and recognitions. So first of all, to Mr. Behrens, as I said before, for helping to organize the intramural basketball league. He's been continuing to set up dates, times, and spaces for games. And he's also been able to find willing referees to help with the games. And then a big shout out to Mr. Sniff, Mr. Bursine, Miss Dolby, for helping at least the high school and obviously all the other principals for helping their schools get a smooth transition back from break, because it's not always easy to do, but they all did a great job.
Great, thank you. Anybody have any questions or
I
comments?
have a question. For the class test drive week, do you find kids that are changing their minds about things that they want to take because all of a sudden something sounds interesting that they hadn't thought about before?
Personally, the class test drives did change my mind. I took a test about the second music technology class, and I wasn't initially planning on taking it, but after hearing what Miss Mitchell had to say about it, I was actually really interested. So now I did request it for my schedule for next year. So I can't imagine that there are a lot of other students that are feeling the same way, that sometimes those class test drives do actually change their minds.
I would think that would be one of the goals, is to get
Right.
different ideas.
Yeah, the idea is to, get your feet wet with something and have a better sense of what you're signing up for.
I know a couple of my friends as well said they took, I believe it was a Model UN test drive, and it interested them a lot. So great to hear that it is kind of doing its job, getting students to think about new things.
Warms my heart as a past Model UN teacher. Although Mr. Douglas, I'm sure, is far superior at it to what I was.
Hey Dylan, is intramural is new to the high school this year, or?
No, it's been going on for a couple years, but this year's league just got formed, and
Okay.
the teams got formed, and the schedule got made.
And do you get to form your own? You said draft, or do you guys form your own teams?
Yeah, Mr. Barron sent out a survey to all of the students who might be interested, and all of the students who did respond that they would be interested were entered into like a student draft where a couple seniors were named captains of the teams, and they just got to select students anonymously, and then everyone was just let know what teams they were on and the dates of the games and everything.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure it has happened since COVID. Do you know? I believe the intramurals were paused.
We always had it. I don't know if they were last year or not. They may have happened, they may have happened last year.
It's great that it's back. if
Is
was
it just
last year or this
is
year.
it just basketball, or do they do it during volleyball season, or? Is it
I think we just have basketball.
Just basketball? Yeah.
I think.
I think it's also interesting Dylan's shirt.
I was going to bring that up. Very
Just,
brave young
salt
man
in
at
the
the end of
wound,
this
Dil.
table.
Salt in the wound.
Die-hard Michigan sports fan. I apologize to you all.
Although I will say, I really wish they would have made the playoffs if they were in,
Yeah.
because I would have rooted for them, because I love Jamal Williams, and
He's a funny guy.
they deserve an opportunity to get in there. I think they would have done well. I think they're a good team.
Better than the Seahawks will.
I think you're probably right. I don't think any of them are going to beat San Francisco, so it probably didn't matter.
All right, thank you, Dylan and Musab, nice job.
Good
Okay.
report.
Any comments from citizens, Julie? Salutes and recognitions. Board members, does anybody have anything?
I do not.
John, Mike?
Yeah, one, for our custodial staff and those people who were working and got in here over the break when we had some issues with the cold, and getting the building put back together and getting everything in place to be ready to go when the students came back on the second. They did a yeoman's work that previous week.
What was the issue?
We had a sprinkler head and multiple
Oh.
other spots where we had leaks. We had four different spots where we had Asa Clark in the roof by a classroom. We had a sprinkler head in Tony's office over his conference room table. There was another classroom, I think, and because of the wind and the cold and those kinds of things, but we caught them very quickly, which was good. But John and Olivia and the crew were very much on top of it to make sure things are ready for students to come back.
Good, wonderful. Mike, do you have anything?
Yeah, I just, and Julie, we don't need to send out an additional, because we've already done our recognition, but I just, want to make sure we acknowledge that it's Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. Today, I delivered cookies down to the village PD, and we had gifts for Officer Corus and for Officer Budenhagen today, and to thank them for their service. So just want to acknowledge our law enforcement friends today.
Wonderful, thanks. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. We have the minutes from previous meetings, the general meeting and the policy and business affairs, the correspondence that was included in our packet, and the two gifts regarding, or for the high school fitness center. $50,000 donated by the Pewaukee Youth Football Association and $19,400 from the Pewaukee PTO. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor of accepting the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Passes. All right, moving on to our Business Affairs Committee, Brian.
Business Affairs met earlier tonight. We went through the check register and had questions answered. It was a bit of a slower month than the previous ones, given that we're into the school year. We also reviewed the financial report. We've got about 9 or 10% of our revenue and I think 42% of our expenses. So typical this time of year anyways, and that's why we have that short-term borrowing. We did talk about post-employment benefits, and the good news there is our liability will start going down. We are, if you will, aging out for some of the benefits that we had in place. I think it was 14 people had post-healthcare benefits for 5 years, and I think we're dropping down to 1, so that's gonna have a significant impact on reducing our liability. There's still gonna be an HRA benefit, but at some point that may change as well and have a positive impact on our liability. We also talked about those things that go into the handbook that could have financial implications. First one we talked about is actually putting a process together for figuring out extracurricular pay, kind of a process-oriented group, and that only makes sense to do. And we also talked about the disparity between summer school pay and in-house substituting, and try to bring some equity to that. But John will be looking at the financial implications of those changes and coming forward for recommendations.
All right.
And the committee recommends acceptance of the report.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of accepting the Business Affairs Committee report, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Brian. Okay, moving on to new business. We start out with special education caseload discussion. Anthony?
Yeah, so we've asked Tony to come in. This is a process improvement, to have him come and present on special ed caseload. You have the documents in your materials for him to talk about that as information for you to consider when you're determining space allocation for open enrollment seats, which will be the next item on the agenda. So with that, Tony, if you want to walk us through the information.
Good evening, everybody. So I put together a document. We've been using case weights and looking at numbers of students per teacher for the last, this will be year 10 now. And on the chart in figure 1.1, you will notice, and actually Julie pulled it up for me. Okay. So you will notice that early childhood is currently, the target would be 4. We have a morning and afternoon session. We have a projected number of 1, but that is the largest area of growth over the last 5-year period. We always end up having a lot of new kids that have not been identified from birth to 3. Every year it ends up at around 6. On this first table for PLE, the one area that's a little bit over is 2nd grade. It's at 11. We have 1.5 teachers. What we did not do in our projections is we did not tie the FTE specifically to grade levels at this time. That is something that we do in our February budgeting process and programming at the building level. But I wanted to highlight that because that is an area. So if we move that 1.5 that's in 1st grade, that would put the projected caseload at a 7.3. Our projections, our ideal is an 8 to 10, but PLE is a building that has the greatest number of move-ins. We see the highest fluctuation. In addition to that, you will also see a greater number of kids getting referred for special ed at the younger grades. So if my recommendation for PLE is to close seats for early childhood, 4K, 5K, 1st and 2nd grade. Keeping in mind that EC is another area that grows every year. We ended up adding an additional 2 sections this year. We do a peer program 2 days a week where we free up the other 2 days a week because it's a part-time staff member that goes out into community daycares to service kids in our partner sites over at WCTC. If I could put your attention to figure 1.2. Now that building is Horizon Elementary. The target student ratio is 8 to 10 students. As you can see here in third grade, there's a number of 12 students there. However, that building has 5 FTE, so you would divide that by 1.5 FTE, and that would put you at 8, which is right in the range for third grade. Fourth grade is a grade that is very large. Currently, we have 2 teachers serving third grade. Those kids are going to move into fourth grade, and we have allocation of staff. It would be 12.5 students, and I recognize that you can't have a 0.5 of a student, but for mathematical purposes and guiding us as we just make a determination this evening to close seats, my recommendation is to close seats at both third and fourth grade. And then in fifth grade, we have, again, a target range of 8 to 10. That would, if you divide that by 1.5 to 13, that puts you at 8.6. I put a star on my sheet for grade 4 because that is something that we'll have to be mindful of as we navigate the February budgeting process and staffing to see how that looks and how we're going to allocate staff. We have an additional part of an FTE there, an intervention, a 0.2, where our school psychologist does 0.2 intervention as well.
Anthony, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So for grade 4, you said it's an abnormally large group. Has a staff been moving with that grade?
So to answer your question, we didn't have staff move, but we hired for it.
Okay.
Because when they were over at PLE, the group has grown. The other thing I want to point out is this is also taking into consideration referrals in process. Referrals that are almost processed, where we have a pretty good idea as to whether or not the student's going to qualify or not. So to answer your question, next year we're going to have 2 staff. We don't know if we went to a grade-specific model where we have a teacher tied to each grade level so that they can understand the scope and sequence of the curriculum and best support the students as it pertains to their accommodations and their specially designed instruction. Most likely there will be a teacher potentially moving. We don't know who the teacher is. That is something we offer the buildings the autonomy to make those determinations.
Okay.
The middle school, we made,
Yeah, I understand why the seats are closed, but if I'm looking at these right, it looks like you're gonna be short-staffed here. You're gonna have to put in more FTEs.
we are looking at the possibility of adding FTE. There'll be some recommendations at the February meetings if the numbers hold true.
Okay.
There
Thank you.
will, because we have, the special education department has almost doubled in size in the last 10 years, and growth tends to almost lag a year behind. Case in point, when we projected last February, things looked really good. But then March, April, May, we saw an influx of referrals. We were processing referrals in the months of June and July. We're seeing an uptick across all 4 buildings. So at the middle school,
Tony, when you talk about staff, are you talking about teachers only, not the paras?
this formulation did not take into consideration the paraprofessionals. And we benefit greatly from the number of paraprofessionals. And that is also one of the challenges that we encounter when we get comparables. I have all of the comparables from our neighboring districts. CISA just presented us directors with a document saying where the ranges are. We are within those ranges. And I'll get into that a little bit more. So what we do when we are doing our staffing models here in Pewaukee, we not only look at what our numbers are, but we look at what our neighbors' numbers are and what are the numbers of other districts. One of the difficulties with paraprofessionals is oftentimes, many times, paraprofessionals are tied to a specific student, whether it's one-on-one or extensive support for that student. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to calculate the para support staff between districts because everyone deploys a different para model. Any additional questions? Asa Clark, where the range is 8 to 10. For 6th grade, we have 2 teachers per grade level. They're going to be at 8.5 per caseload. 7th grade, 8.5, and 8th grade is 9. So we're right where we need to be. So the recommendation for Asa Clark Middle School would be to close all seats at this time. There are anticipated referrals as well through the RTI process, but they're kids that go through the RTI process where we like to have a minimum of 2, but we like to have 3 interventions deployed for a period of 6 to 12 weeks prior to a referral and prior to a student qualifying per the state criteria for specific learning disability in the area of math and reading. So just disclosing that as well. Now the high school is a whole nother story. We have probably seen our greatest influx of new students at Pewaukee High School. Now mind you, last February and March when we were doing our projections, the projections were falling between 14 and 15. Middle and high school, traditionally in the Pewaukee School District, we were running about 15, 16 kids per caseload, which is right in alignment with many of our neighbors. Arrowhead currently is at 18 kids a caseload, and they're projecting 18 for next year as well. So we talked to all of our neighbors. We're seeing the same influx of referrals for anxiety. There's been a significant uptick. And one of the other trends that we're seeing in special education is anxiety is now qualifying as emotional behavioral disturbance, where there's anxiety both in the home and at school. We never saw that 10, 12 years ago, where it was pretty much more of explosive behaviors off task. So just trying to explain some of the why. But when you look at our ranges, ideally here in the Pewaukee School District, we would like to see our caseloads between 12 and 14. But what we're seeing even with right now, Pewaukee High School has 5 FTE. We added FTE this school year. We added a 50% teacher to support our high school staff with essential students. Essential students are those students that have significant needs where they have a great deal of paraprofessional support. And the other thing that many of the essential students have in common is they're all taking part in the essential elements. So they take the DLM dynamic learning maps instead of Wisconsin forward testing. The reason that that's important is those students take far greater amounts of time to case manage because you have to direct, guide, and plan for the paraprofessional to carry out the supplementary aids and services that are listed in the IEP. So that was an addition that we were able to add, and we got a really good staff member in August. One of the struggles that not only we have, but our neighboring districts are having is there are no applicants in the area of special education. So, you know, we've been kicking around and having discussions about adding additional staff, but then the question is, who do you add this time of the year? Because a lot of really good staff are under contract and things of that nature. So if I highlight this, with 5 FTE from a mathematical formula, we're looking at doing, the caseloads are, right now they're high. If you look at that current caseload number ratio, it's at 22, and when we tally in the FTE, we're at 17.6, 17.6 in 10th grade, 16.8 in 11th grade, and 10.4 in 12th grade. And one of the, now the high school is not grade specific. They will case manage a student freshman year and most likely will follow the student through all 4 years of high school, and then they go to the 18 and 21 program. So that's one of the unique things about the high school that differs from all of the other buildings. My recommendation as a result of the high numbers that we're seeing here at Pewaukee High School, and to answer your question, is that something that we're going to be looking at in February staffing when we're building the model for next year? The answer is yes, especially if the numbers hold true. But my recommendation at this time, we are exceeding our target ratio, teacher to student, 12 to 14. Right now, we're running 18, and next year, we're going to be 15, 16 kids a caseload, is the anticipated at this point, and that would be if no more students qualified from now until the end of the year. The other thing that makes high school unique is that we have a number of students that are outplaced, and that is where our 18 to 21 coordinator, even though the caseload is lower than the rest of the team, that individual staff member handles the case management and the IEPs for those outplaced students. So even though they may be on somebody else's caseload, that was something that we put in place to help support, recognizing that the workload has increased over the last years with the growing number of students. So my recommendation, K4 through 12th grade, is to close all seats for special education due to our unprecedented growth.
Thank you, Anthony.
Anthony, do you want to talk about the speech at all?
Oh, yeah, I got to talk about speech because that's the one. So if you look at the speech, thanks, Mike.
Yep, I'm here to help.
I greatly appreciate it. Speech and language, we don't want to forget about speech. So I just want to highlight SLP1. We identified our speech and language pathologists as SLP1, SLP2, all the way up to 6. And what I want to highlight here, that is another area that we've added to. We added to last year during the budget cycle. And our numbers, our recommended caseloads, were far exceeding that at this time in the area of speech and language. We do have a higher rate of dismissal at times, but even with that, with our projections, we are going to be well within our projected range, our caseload cap, and we're going to exceed that in many instances. So our projected for each of these, SLP1, and I put it in the narrative, that is our SLP that handles early childhood. So that would be any kids that are referred from birth to 3 or come here as 3-year-olds. It's kind of the same as we do for our EC teacher. The numbers are always low this time of year, but we see them explode by October, November of each year. That's the highest area of growth in pretty much any district is early childhood, because a number of those students haven't been identified, but they will be identified, and especially when they transition from birth to 3. SLP2 also services early childhood. That would be helping out with the 3-year-olds, doing itinerant to daycares, and helping out in our EC program. The projected for that one on a 50% caseload is 15, so we're already there when we have a cap of 30. SLP3 is starting with 26, projected for next school year. That one also picks up that speech and language pathologist, services K4, K5. Again, another grade area that we see a lot of referrals in. And then the other SLPs are all over the range already at 41 for SLP4, 48 for SLP5, SLP6 is at 38, and SLP7, which is our middle high school speech therapist, is at 51. Now, you might ask, those numbers are pretty high, so speech and language can range anywhere from 40 to 60 students. Ideal caseloads would be 30. It is not uncommon for districts to far exceed the ideal for those numbers. But what we don't know at this day in January is how many dismissals we're going to have, how many new students. But the recommendation, looking at the numbers that we have before us this evening, is to close all seats for speech and language at all grade levels.
Anthony, just to either be clear on this or maybe I misunderstood. So you talked about the growth in the number of students. Is it as a result of move-ins or just internal identification or referrals to special education?
I would say it's a combination of both. We have a number of move-ins, at most common at the elementary, but we've also seen new students enroll at the middle and high school. Any given year, we could end up with 10 or 15 new enrollees. I would say the biggest impact that we've seen is the onslaught of referrals. I've never in my 25 years seen the rate of referral that I am seeing. I literally signed 3 before I came over here this evening, and that's pretty much on par for every week this school year. Between speech and language, special education, and Section 504, we are seeing a huge influx of referrals.
Where are these referrals coming from?
Referrals, we're seeing more and more referrals come from outside pediatricians. A lot of the doctor's offices in the area will have a video playing. And go to a dermatology office in Economowalk and they'll say, if you have concerns, Forefront Dermatology has a little thing, you have concerns, refer your student, talk to your school about a 504 plan or IEP. And a lot of it is parents becoming more educated and really proactive, wanting to help their children. So that's we're seeing referrals. And the good news is we did an analysis and not every student that is referred is qualifying for special education, but we're processing more and more referrals than we ever have.
But then you also, I mean, other school districts are seeing the same thing happen.
We're all seeing the same trend, correct?
There's no other questions, we can. Go ahead.
Move on to open enrollment. Thank you, Anthony.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks,
John.
Anthony.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you. All right. The open enrollment seat designation, John, is this you?
Yep, so one of the actions that we need to take in the month of January is to establish the number of seats available in the district for applications to be accepted for open enrollment. The process we use is to identify everybody who is in a seat prior September, the year before in September, and then also look at the count as we have it as of December of the year, so we can see any trends that are happening moving forward. And then look at some recommended levels for target class sizes that we have in the district. And we use open enrollment as a tool to optimize the delivery. So offset the operating cost of those classrooms by adding in open enrollment students where we have the opportunity. It brings in revenue to the district that's outside of the revenue limit. Generates about $1.1 million a year of net revenue to the district that we can reinvest into programs to offer in the classrooms. The goal is not to add any sections to a grade level, but more to optimize how the resources are used in that grade level with the class sizes that we have. And again, it gives you additional resources to do some really unique things and to maintain offerings of some programs within the district that you wouldn't be able to afford otherwise by having that net revenue. So open enrollment in the district here, we've used this process since early 2000 to determine the number of seats. It was determined by the board way back in 2000 that one of the quality indicators of the district was a net positive open enrollment trend. When open enrollment first started, we had a negative trend. We had more students leaving the district than we had coming into the district. That turned around in the early 2000s, and we've been positive ever since. Right now, in the 22-23 school year, 275 open enrollment students coming into the district, with about 97, 98 that leave the district to go someplace else. Majority of the students who leave the district are in virtual environments, just to accommodate their learning needs as they go out. You will see more on that as we accept the seat designations and take action on approval of the applicants when we get into May. That's one of the actions that the board takes in May. So with a recommendation, this will close open enrollment alternative seat or alternative applications. So once the board designates or restricts the number of seats that are available for open enrollment, we cannot accept an alternative applicant. Logic being, if somebody gets into open enrollment, you have the right to continue. So if we let somebody in on an alternative application after we set the number of seats, they're filling a seat that should be occupied by somebody who's applying during the normal process and would be here next year. So between tonight and the third Friday in September, we will not have any alternative applications that we'll be accepting in the district. With that, we always try to balance the open enrollment numbers to maintain that balance between in and out and keep that net positive open enrollment around that $1 million to $1.1 million. We receive about $9,000 ballpark for each student that comes in, and that much for each student that leaves we pay to the other districts. So with that, we really push to get the kids in here as early as possible. So the recommendation this year follows what we've done for several years. In 4-year-old kindergarten, looking at opening 10 seats. This is one area where 4K, predictability of the 4K class was really good pre-COVID. Last year, we had a relatively small class, so we'll have to monitor really closely if that becomes a trend. Are there less 4K students that are coming into the district, or was that an anomaly? So that's something we'll keep a close eye on. As registration continues throughout the spring and summer, we may come back to the board and recommend opening additional seats in the 4K program if the numbers are lower, to have that class size optimized in 4K. In kindergarten, as a result of the smaller 4K class this past year that's moving up, we're recommending a few more students, 7 more seats be open in kindergarten for next year. Typically, 4K and 5K are our biggest applicant pools that come in. We'll see in excess of 30 students applying for those 10 seats and the 7 seats that are at kindergarten. Grade 1, we're recommending open 2 seats. Grade 2, 5 seats. Grade 3, 4 seats. And grade 4, 5, and 6, 2 seats in each of those grades. At the elementary level, and then no seats available beyond that for 7 through 12 for open enrollment.
7, you have 2.
Oh, I'm sorry, 7th is 2 also. 8 through 12, no seats available.
Do we want to take a motion on this one first off?
Can I just ask a question before we do that? So you're talking about our downward trend in 4K and the possibility of opening more seats. Are we at risk then for messing with the equilibrium? Because you would assume that those kids are going to come in 5K, right?
So when we first started the 4K program, our 5K over 4K ratio, our 4K to 5K ratio was about 60-65%. So 65% of the kids who were in year 2 in kindergarten attended here in 4K the year before. Pre-COVID, that number climbed up to just over 90%. So it was getting very predictable. It was communicated very well, the community and the students were there. Last year was the first full year really of normal operations where we would see 4K coming back. 2 things can happen here. One is going to be rebound back to where it was, about 90% of 5K is 4K. We'll be able to determine that with 5-year-old kindergarten registration this year. How many kids came back in 5K that just elected not to do 4K for this past year? Or we're going to see a spike up in 4K again, returning back to the normal where we were. We'll have that data in probably February and March as we start doing the 4K and 5K roundup events. We'll have much better data on that to predict where it's going.
Do you want to make a motion on the first one?
So we have 3 motions that are associated with this.
Yeah.
We have the regular ed seats, or the seats that are available by grade level within the district. The second motion is, as Mr. Strenke was talking about, with the special ed seat availability for open enrollment. And then the third recommended motion is part of the board policy, where when we make the seat determination in December, we look at every body that's in a seat. So if those students are tuition waiver students or they're attending here under open enrollment, they're assumed to already occupy a seat and they are granted attendance through open enrollment the following year. Same thing with siblings of currently attending students as of that December count period. So that's the third motion.
I'll move to declare a total of 36 open enrollment seats available at the following grades for 2022 to 2023 as presented.
Hold on.
23, 24.
23, 24.
Sorry, 23, 24, sorry. Thank you. Or do you want me to read them all?
Julie, do you want him to read them? Okay.
Okay.
As you said, as presented. So do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion to declare the 36 open enrollment seats as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion number 2.
Move to close the following programs due to lack of space: preschool phonology, early childhood, speech and language grades EC to 12, special learning, specific learning disabilities program K-12, emotional behavior disabilities programs K-12, intellectually disabled K-12, blind and visually impaired K-12, deaf and hard of hearing K-12.
Second.
All in favor of the motion to close those programs due to lack of space, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion number 3.
The board will accept full-time open enrollment applications of students in the upcoming application period who are currently included in the count of occupied spaces and attending Pewaukee School District. The board will further also accept full-time open enrollment applications of siblings of students who are currently enrolled and included in the count of occupied spaces and are attending the Pewaukee School District and at a grade where available space has been determined.
Second.
All in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Mouthful, Brian. Nice job.
Good job, by the way, too, Anthony. Thank you for your hard work.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the softball diamond bids.
All right, so this is gonna continue with the John show here, and I do wanna acknowledge the work that he's done, in getting us to this point with the softball, diamond bids, but I'll let you have you take it from here.
So we have 3 different proposals that have been let since November when we met. Board throughout this process has been involved in the approval of both the design and engineering contracts, along with the approval of the project. Again, we'll be utilizing Fund 41, the Capital Improvement Projects Fund, to finance this project. The first round of bids was the field construction, which is the largest, and had some of the greatest variability in the returns that we received from the bids. We had 6 companies come through the walkthrough early in December out on the field to a contractor walkthrough prior to the bids being due. 5 different firms did submit proposals to us, and we're recommending approval of H&H Civil Construction LLC. Their total cost for their proposal is $513,000. And that is basically the broad scope of the entire project. All fencing, subgrade work, drainage work, finishes.
Worked with them before, John?
We have not. They are,
Recognize the name.
they have been completing a lot of the field projects and that have been going on in the area, though. They've been successful.
For softball field, you mean, or
Both,
field in general? Okay.
both, yeah.
Do you want us to move each one individually, or do you want to go through all?
You want me to
three?
rip through it and go through them and then?
I think we could.
The second part of the proposal then is the carpet itself, the turf itself that will go on the field, and the installation of that. Again, we had we interviewed at the end of October, all the major players in the area, and then had another one come in later, about 2 weeks later, and present to us their turf product. Everybody has a unique design to their turf products, that makes them specific to an application, like a softball field is much different than a football field, is much different than a soccer field, when you're doing this turf. We had 6 firms submit pricing on this, and we're recommending Midwest Sports and Turf Surfaces. Total cost for that turf installation and along with that maintenance on it, part of the maintenance agreement, at $199,000. And the last scope of work that we wanted to look at electrical as an alternate initially on this project. And once we started moving the orientation of the field to meet some municipal requirements and to meet requirements of orientation of the field and how things fit back there. It's a really tight site if you actually go look at it with what needs to happen. Lighting really became a necessity as we looked at this project. So we received proposals. Let's say there were 4 firms that returned proposals to us, and that includes the Musco lighting system like we have on our other fields. We really have that cutoff to darkness very close to the field. It's very directional and a lot of mirrors in there. And connecting electricity to both the dugouts and to the press box. So that is all combined in the scope of the work. And $191,500 is the final price once we do the considerations on that.
One thing I'd point out on that, one of the reasons the lighting became really important, we had a water main piece that we had to adjust for in orienting the field. It's going to, the JV field that currently exists will not be playable for games because of the orientation of the field. So we're gonna need lights, because we're gonna have to be able to go JV varsity games there, because they'll be going later into the evening. So, so the lighting really became essential for this project.
Good question. When you say the orientation of the field, what changed or what's?
Currently, it's probably easiest to walk you through it. So you got home plate where it is. Home plate shifts about 35 feet, so about halfway to where third base was, so it moves to the south that direction, and the field gets turned about 10 degrees. So the foul pole, instead of going straight down to the south, it turns to the southwest. It allows us to avoid a 12-inch water main and an 8-inch water main that come around two sides of the field and feed the well house down here in the municipal water system.
And one thing that is an advantage, and correct me if I'm off on this, John, is we have been looking for potential of more space for ASA students.
Yes.
During lunch and those kinds of things in terms of outside space that they can use, and this will actually help with that as well.
Once we move it, it allows us to put a pad there and install a couple more basketball hoops where outside of the field can be utilized for that purpose.
Just something we've been working on ever since we brought the sixth grade over. We've been trying to kind of coordinate with Horizon, so sixth graders can still in essence have some level of recess in their day, and this will definitely help, and kids really like to get outside during their lunch period, so.
Do you have a Gaga pit?
Horizon does.
Horizon does?
What was the question?
We have a Gaga ball pit.
I'm saying it right.
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Yeah, no, that's
Mhm.
right. Gaga ball. I was very much introduced to that at Camp Whitcomb, so, yes.
Okay, any other questions or
Does
comments?
this also include new clubhouses and a scoreboard, or
New
We-
dugouts.
The scoreboard will be relocated to center field. That scoreboard's only 2 years old. So part of the scope of work that's built in there is relocation of it over to a center field location, along with relocating the batting cage that's back there is in the scope of work. And the dugouts, we're working with a contractor that Mr. Behrens has been contacted by to do like we did with the soccer press box. That was, we buy the materials and the labor is donated by a local contractor to put masonry dugouts there and a masonry press box.
when you talked about changing the field, I just wondered how many of those other things
Fits.
Yeah, those things had to be
Yeah.
replaced.
The
The
dugouts
existing
I don't recall
dugouts,
Being in good shape, are they?
no,
I didn't think so.
I don't believe the press box is in very good shape, and the dugouts are really not functional. They're too low to see the field adequately, so that all needed to be redone regardless.
Thank you. Anything else? Anyone else?
So, I mean, from the drainage standpoint, because with a turf field, you have to have really good drainage, right? So how does that play into this?
It's infield storage with it, so basically large collector pipes that'll be underneath the field that will take the 100-year storm and be able to remove it and have it infiltrate that way.
No, it should really improve.
Yeah.
Improve the drainage in that area considerably.
I'll move to approve the field construction bid with H&H Civil Construction LLC.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of approving the proposal from H&H, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, second one.
I'll move to approve the turf installation bid with Midwest Sports and Turf Surfaces.
Second.
Second.
All in favor of approving the motion to go with the proposal from Midwest Sports and Turf Services, say aye. Any opposed? All right, third one.
Move to approve the proposal from Piper Electric for the installation of field lighting and electrical in the amount of $191,500.
Second.
All in favor of approving the motion to go with Piper Electric, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you, John, for all your work on that.
That's gonna be great.
What's the timing?
May 17th, breaking ground and completion by the end of the second week of August.
There's no supply chain issues with turf?
We are out early enough that we can, we're in the front of the queue.
Okay, cool.
Okay, moving on to our Community School Resource Officer.
Yeah, we wanted to bring this forward to you, and John, feel free to jump in for comments. The board approved the position through the budgeting process October 24th. Subsequently, and as we discussed at the time, again, you had two governmental bodies working on this. You as a board, the Village Board of Trustees, they continue to work with us on the details of the agreement. They finalized the agreement in December at their meeting. Then we had to wait until the union for the police department also approved the agreement. We received this December 21st. And then we had, again, I wanted to confirm with Chief Hire that the union had approved it, which they did unanimously. So now we wanted to bring this agreement forward, this board has approved the original memorandum of understanding with the village when Officer Budenhagen was hired. I think that was like 5 years ago at this point. But this is a modified version that reflects the second officer and the extension into the summer and those pieces. So we wanted to bring that forward so that you could view it and we would seek your approval.
Anyone?
Just to refresh us maybe just a little bit, Mike, in terms of the reasons or the rationale for this. I mean, obviously, we have got close to 3,000 or more than 3,000 kids on campus, but what other reasons justify the additional officer?
Yeah, you have 3,000 students on campus. You have 400 and almost 40 employees on campus, visitors every day. One shift of an officer does not cover the entire day. We had previously not had coverage for summer school. So those are among the issues. What's, again, interesting about the second position, because of the board's decision to approve a Fund 80 levy, is really considered a community resource officer. So while Officer Corus's position functions very similar to Officer Budenhagen's position during the school year, there is much more flexibility and expectation that she be available for broader community use. In fact, we'll probably use the two officers both in that way. But really, it was, I think, a real comprehensive move with greater flexibility, higher level of service, and again, to extend that coverage that we didn't have with just a single officer. And it does dramatically improve security.
Can you comment a little bit on the partnership with the village on this? I mean, how did it go, I guess, if you will?
It went really well. You know, I was talking to Chief Hire today because like I said, I went down there to deliver the gifts for Law Enforcement Appreciation Day today. So, you know, we really worked in a great partnership with them in terms of it, you know, receiving applicants, putting interview questions together. You know, our staff, along with Officer Budenhagen and Assistant Chief Gary, were on the interview committee with the officers that had applied for the position. So, you know, the collaboration since the inception of the School Resource Officer Program has been really great.
It's great to hear that, by the way.
Yeah, it's a really good partnership. We're very fortunate to have such a good relationship with our village police department.
All right, do I have a motion?
For it.
I'm ready.
Okay, move to approve the Community Resource Officer / School Resource Officer Memorandum of Understanding as presented.
Second.
All in favor of approving the Resource Officer Memorandum of Understanding, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Great idea. I mean, obviously, things that we can do to make sure that our campus stays as safe as possible for our kids here is always to the benefit of our community. So,
Yeah, I think it's a really good. It was just as a side note, visiting Officer Corus has only been here for a week, but went to her office in PLE today, and her entire wall is covered with pictures and drawings and welcomes from elementary students, and she said, "This is amazing. I usually get hate mail." So, so she's enjoying it so far. So,
Good to hear.
Just like the idea of getting the kids used to the fact that police officers are their friend.
yeah,
In today's society, that's not always the case.
yes, yep. And I've given you the schedule of the two officers and kind of how the two of them have they've done a nice job working together to make this as efficient as possible.
Okay. Jeannie?
Okay, policy. I think most, if not all, of the policies that we went through were just on our regular cycle. So we did not make very many changes. 6900.05, community programs and services, which is Fund 80. All we did was add the non-discrimination paragraph. at the
Well, and
end.
that one is new. That one
That
is
one's new?
That's a new policy that we've given you a draft of before. So, yeah, the community programs and
Okay.
services, that was something that we composed. We didn't previously have, and as we went with the Fund 80 levy for the resource officer, we were advised that best practice would be to compose a policy. So that is a new policy.
I just had it down as first read. I didn't get any questions on it.
It is
so-
first read of the draft that we've been working on.
No issues, no issues here.
Okay. 3900.06, we made no change, equal opportunity employment, we made no changes to this. See, we changed it fairly recently. Any questions? 4,000.11, staff development, again, we made no changes to this one either. If you look at it, we changed it fairly recently. 4,000.15, uniform services, non-discrimination, and reemployment rights. All we did on this one was change some of the grammar. 51,000.01, age of entrance, and we made no changes on that. 5,100.04, student attendance, we made no changes on that one. 5,200.06, we made a lot of changes, but if you remember, we had policy number 6,700.01 where we talked about graduation requirements. So we took all of the graduation requirements off of this policy because now they're in the other one. It was redundant to have them in two policies. And y'all kind of prepped us for this actually when we went to the other one. 5,100.06. We did not make any changes to the policy except for a couple of grammar changes. The most of the changes in this one came in the procedures because of changes in legislation, correct, Mike?
Which one is
Which
this?
one are we on
Yeah, I
here?
think we're
Public
confused.
school open enrollment.
Is that 7,100? Which one are we on?
Nope,
5200.06 is the grading procedure.
Yeah.
5,100.01 are we looking at? That was age
That
of
was age
entrance.
of entrance.
that was
5200.
5,200.06.
That's grading.
That's the
5,200.06
grading one.
That was the grading one.
Yeah.
And then
Okay,
your last
so then we
one
have
is,
to go to, I'm sorry, the other one was
7,100.
just procedures. 7,100.11, Board of Education evaluation process. This is the one that we were kind of coming up with to get our new evaluation meeting involved into it. Not get any questions on it, but we're
Good with that
more
one.
than open to suggestions too yet.
Make it look good.
It was proposed in April, so we've been working on this one for a while.
All right, anything for Jeannie?
That's it then, thank you.
All right, thank you, Jeannie. Okay, moving on to personnel issues. There are none.
Yep, no resignations, no retirements, no employments, no leaves.
Yay. Okay, moving on to board goals and operations, review of upcoming activities. So I know most of us are able to go to the WASB conference, and there was a time change on the post-secondary presentation to 3:30, so please note that one on the 18th, on Wednesday, the 18th. Friday, the 20th is the measuring your grad profile at 9:15. And then January 30th, we're meeting with Melissa and Candace, our learning session at 6 p.m.
So on that one, a week ahead of time, you'll get information pushed out to you. I met with Candace today, who's done a really nice job getting all the data together and putting the presentation together, so you'll get that on the 24th, so you have some time to familiarize yourself with that, and it's also being shared with Melissa for that session.
Okay. And then our meeting on Monday, February 13th, Business Affairs at 6 p.m., Board at 7, and then our next meeting after that is the 27th. And then if we jump into March, we have our learning session on March 6th at 6 p.m. That one, superintendent board goals.
It's
that
really
that
about
one is?
the response intervention
Oh,
process.
RTI, yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you. And then we have some dates that Julie's asked us to hold for the Facility Long Range Community Forum on Monday, April 17th, and then the Community Strategic Planning Session on Monday, May 15th.
Quick question on the April 17th one. There's not an official board meeting at that one, right? 'Cause I
No.
will not be able to attend.
No. There's only one board meeting, I believe, in April. And it's the next week, I think, the 24th.
Do we know when the awards banquet is gonna be yet or not? Do we have the dates?
Kiwanis one?
It's usually in May.
That's typically in May. Yeah. So I don't have that yet.
17th.
You're gonna guess the 17th? John's saying it's probably the 17th of May.
Karnak?
He needs one of those hats.
All right. Legislative updates?
Yes, actually, the activity is starting to
Pick up.
underway. So there's an official Southeastern Wisconsin School Alliance meeting tomorrow morning of the school districts, about 30-some or so in southeast Wisconsin. The unique thing about the SWSA is it's made up of the superintendents and an individual board member from each of the member school districts. I did circulate, and I think Julie, you did place it into the board packet.
It's in board docs.
It's in the documents. So anyway, the basic thing is, it's kind of our theme mantra for a long time, sustainable and actual spendable dollars out there, and John can probably attest to that as well. I mean, it's one thing if you have tax credits or levy credits, whatever it is, but it still doesn't put actually dollars in the hands of the school districts to work with. So that's one big part of it, but other than that, I mean, it's really, school districts are facing staffing shortages in every single position. And again, that's pretty big topic around the state. Public school districts also are facing some eminent fiscal cliffs. And John can talk a lot more about that in terms of what's happening in terms of those things. But again, we've got the inflation factors that are out there, and there's some shortfalls that are coming up as a result of that. We also must address the special education services. Anthony has left, but I mean, obviously, we're hearing and seeing more in terms of special education needs for students out there, and then some other details relative to the spendable revenue, again, rather than tax levy credits kinds of things. So this is kind of the basic draft of some things that they're suggesting and proposing that would be sent to our respective legislative folks if we want to in terms of things. But I mean, tomorrow there's another full board meeting or full SWSA meeting to kind of go through this. So this was a draft that was just sent out like literally an hour or two before the meeting today, so a couple hours maybe.
Is there any activity about the special education funding? Like, they talk about trying, because that goal was made, and then it's just kind of been stagnant, right?
Yeah, I think it was quantified back in September when the governor's office requested and said that, or the DPI requested and said, here's the funding level that we're looking at. The SAA also adopted that. That was the last real, the last time where I've seen information quantified about what that meant to go to 50% and then, or 45% and then 60% in the second year of the biennium. As we see faster growth in the programming, that dollars that it takes to hit that percent reimbursement grow at the same rate. So what was last September is pre-accelerated pace that Mr. Stranke illustrated here that we're seeing right now of identification.
Special ed funding was a big topic in the last biennium as well, to increase that reimbursement rate. So I'm sure we'll hear a lot about that. And the governor, February 11th? 12th, 15th? 15th is going to be, I think, rolling out his biennium budget proposal. So I'm sure that'll be part of it. I would anticipate that would be part of it.
Anything else legislative? All right, strategic planning?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Those dates were in there for you for obviously the date in May. The intention for that is to be a replica of what we did last May. I had really good feedback on that. For those of you who were involved. If you had any suggestions, please feel free to let me know, but kind of the format, I would intend that to be very similar, and bringing our community in to get updates on our strategic plan process and to provide additional feedback to us so we can use that in our summer planning. We have been talking about facilities and again, initiating a process to start taking a look at some facility pieces in the district and to engage our community to get some feedback there. You know, there's some areas like the career and technical education part of this building is one that has not been touched in any substantive way in our, you know, we've had the last two referendums that have touched this building have not addressed that area. We have roofing units and some roof projects and those kinds of things. So we thought it made sense to, especially at this phase of the strategic planning process, this is a little bit of a lighter year. Next year is going to be a much more intense year with strategic planning, the regular process. Here's an opportunity to get facilities, that conversation engaged a little bit going into our strategic planning session in May. So we thought that would be some good background. In working with Candace on the parent and the student surveys, I did have her add a couple of items, just fairly general items about facilities, just to get a little bit of feedback. So certainly open to input on that, but that's something that we felt was probably worthwhile to do this spring. Oh, and in addition, in terms of strategic plan, this Thursday, all 6 of our, you know, process owners will be presenting 90-day updates on their PDSA action plans to the administrative team. So that process is continuing. Originally, those were scheduled in December, but we decided to allocate that time to educator effectiveness, calibration among our leaders. And as I mentioned, those parent survey goes out, I believe, tonight. So parents in the room, you probably have a survey. And we've tried to shave some questions out, although then I added a couple, but we did take more out than we put in. So it is not a super short survey, I will admit. And a student survey is going out shortly as well. And so that data will be helpful for us to take a look at and summarize going into strategic planning later this spring. That's all I have.
Okay. Next, we are tasked with setting the meeting date for the 2023 annual meeting. August?
Yes. Let's see, what was it, Julie, what was it this year? And we did that on a Monday night?
Monday
Okay.
night.
So we'd be looking at August 14th. It seemed to be the equivalent date.
Mm-hmm.
Move to make the annual meeting date of August 14th.
Have a second? Jeannie seconded. All in favor of having the annual meeting on August 14th, 2023, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Moving on to our town hall meeting discussion.
Yeah, following our legal update, this is something that you had quite a bit of discussion about that night. So you have a memorandum just, you know, kind of talking about the elements of doing a town hall meeting. So I wanted to get it back on the agenda so you could discuss as a board what you would like to do.
Thoughts?
I mean, do you expect us to kind of go through all of the stuff, the questions you raised on it, or?
Well, I guess the question is, ultimately the question is do you want us to work to schedule a town hall meeting? And then we could identify, you know, if the answer to that is yes, when would we want to do it? And then we could have some conversation here about the structure of that. We could certainly draft something and bring it back to you for the next meeting if that's your direction as a board.
Right, because if I remember some of the conversations we had regarding this, and the suggestion was kind of made that if we had some specific topics, like 2 or 3 or so, that we would want to get feedback on, because that's really what we're going out to do, is to request feedback from our constituents in terms of the parents, guardians of the Pewaukee School District to say, tell us how we're doing on some of these things. So, I mean, do you have, or do we have some things that would be relevant for us to bring to that kind of a forum or town hall session thinking potentially in advance of our strategic planning sessions and some of those things potentially, but I'm open to it, but
Yeah, you're looking for me for topics?
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I mean,
Anybody in terms of, or anybody in terms of.
Well, I mean,
it might be worthwhile, you guys could talk, I mean, when you meet on the 30th, you know, and you're doing your kind of self-evaluation, maybe that'll surface. I'm sorry, Jane, I might have cut you off.
that's
there,
okay. I was gonna, kind of piggyback with what you guys have done. So you had taken the surveys that you got from the teachers and then went around to the teachers. So, but do we, you know, the parent survey and the student surveys that are coming out, I mean, I guess maybe to see what comes out of that we want some follow-up on. I mean, because as of right now, I mean, the topics could be so wide, whereas that may help us narrow it down.
That's a really good idea, Jane.
What would the timing be on that if Candace,
I'll have to get back to you as to, because if it's deployed tonight and it's gotta be out there for a while, then she's gotta do her process, to synthesize all the data.
Usually have a 2-week turnaround on it, or?
Yeah, a couple of weeks, so,
Says
you
it's
know,
open until
probably,
January 27th.
it's open till the 27th? Thank you. So, I would say probably second meeting in February. Have all that to you by that time. But I can talk to Candace about it. Maybe the first meeting, I don't know, that might be a little tight.
Coding of comments
Yeah.
and stuff, that can take her a while.
I think that I like the timing of doing it before the strategic plan. Try and engage. I don't know why some people don't want to participate in the strategic plan, but maybe this is a format they'd be more comfortable or open to.
Right, I mean, it's another form of a listening session, if you will, and the topics are either kind of areas that we want to focus in on, but I'm sure that people will bring up other topics too, so.
Okay.
And I mean, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna summarize those surveys anyway and look at themes from those to help inform strategic planning regardless. So,
I guess I'm envisioning if there's topics that are more board related.
and again, you might identify some things in your own conversations on the 30th.
Okay. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yep. I do have one other.
Yep.
So Mike mentioned, and I would be derelict in my duties and obligations as a former Wisconsin Forward Award examiner. Julie and Mike. Well, no, I mean,
Okay.
in the past anyway. So the Baldrige criteria training, Steve Hoisington is coming in on February 7th and 8th, correct? Did you do that? So I think Stacy was there last year, I was there, and we invite a lot of the administrators to join us who were there as well. Really, that's the target audience for it. But if you want to learn about the Malcolm Baldrige Award criteria, show up or sign up for it if you can. It's both days, the 7th and the 8th. And Steve does a really, really, really good job with it. He's probably been one of the, I mean, I don't know, what do we call it? Founders of a lot of the stuff with the Wisconsin Center for Performance.
Emeritus something, yeah.
Yeah, something with that kind of stuff. So if you want to learn about it, do it. I think one thing maybe, Julie, in the one criteria, because actually there's going to be a new set of the 23-24 criteria are starting to be released now. So by the end of January, we'll have the 23-24 for the education sector should be out there too. So
Is it a big change?
don't know.
Because the previous one was a big change.
Some of it, yeah. There's pieces of it that are there, but I don't know. I haven't kind of gone through all of it.
And I'll be at that training because, you know, our plan that I've communicated, right, we're trying to do at least every 3 years, keep the administrative team current on the education criteria training. And so it's myself, who else?
Jeff?
Okay. Yep.
Jeff Behrens. And I think Brian?
Well,
Brian's
we weren't gonna pull all the high school admins.
Oh, gotcha.
So.
Okay. Yeah, Brian wasn't
One of them gets an
highlighted.
extension for
Okay.
a year, and they can.
Brian gets a pass?
Because we weren't gonna pull them. Someone's gotta steer the ship, so.
Yeah, no, I'd highly recommend it, though. It's a really good experience if you've got the time.
So let Julie know if you are interested in attending.
You go every time? Do you go every time?
Slow learner.
It's a no, it changes, it changes.
Oh, you opened that one up for me, thanks.
We were doing softball diamond approval tonight, and he threw you a softball.
All right. Julie, any comments from citizens? Imagine that. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.